pondering the orb for a minute, and I didn't really feel like going live, so I thought I would do this instead. And just kind of roll from here on the phone. I just had to grab something, and so I'm going to attempt to articulate some thoughts that often I would do as drive stream, but I don't feel like driving nowhere today. Let me see. Does that work? Yeah, that works. Here I am. Oh, look, you can see my Mjolnir in this shot. A guy made that for me. He was a boss at one of my temp jobs, and he liked my work ethic and my strength and my attitude, the whole 9 yards. So a big part of what's been kind of like been the air of discussion that comes up in my framework that I have been trying to articulate properly is the principle of how we're not used to a certain thing that has now happened, right? We have gone through a double kind of timeline trajectory swap, right? They usually don't change reality so soon, right? Like we had our near 20-year period of time between 9/11 and 2020, which really changed the world in crazy ways, and they were leading up to that point with the with that 15-year period that had passed prior as things were shifting with politics. Then we effectively had about 4 to 5 years of what you would expect from that flip, from the 2020 flip forward, in which nobody pretended they were shocked and surprised, that somehow this guy won the election. And they made it so much worse for themselves because they didn't handle it respectfully with the typical kind of rights and honors of bipartisanship that we were used to. And so now that it's going in an even further direction, they had even less than that, right? And so then from that period, everything seemed kind of normal. We were kind of pushing things in this direction anyway, but at the same time, there was something very different about it all that was somewhat familiar, almost like there was a period of time to make things go good in a certain kind of way. And with the reaction to it's really about how people reacted to the death of Charlie Kirk. You had the wildest of people on the right exploiting it, and you had the wildest people on the left fetishing it in celebration. And the whole thing was an abysmal travesty, right? It was meant to make you feel like a patriotic religious martyr in real time, right? Because many people, um, they really heavily identified with Charlie, and um, most of them identified with Charlie, coming from uh, also the Zionist perspective, as well as many other kind of like it's new conservative. There's some neoconisms with it that kind of unfortunately comes with the territory with um, anything that has been within that fundamentalist Christian orbit in Midwest America. And so with that death of Charlie Kirk, they went for something in the psychic field, and now because the conspiracy verse that existed within conservatism that was fueling um, conservative style anarchy, libertarianism, um, you know, end the Fed type of stuff. And I'm not, and I don't even think end the Fed is out of the cards yet. I think it's still baked in the cake or whatever. But there's a handful of things that were never. A lot of people love to imagine what their politician is. They really love to imagine it. And then there's an entire game being played on imagination. Right? Just like at the end of the day, Donald Trump has never broken a promise. Like has never really broken a promise because he's never really made a promise. Right? You convinced yourself that a promise in accordance with your desires has been made, and you either believe he has promised to do the thing that'll make you incredibly happy or the thing that'll make you incredibly angry. And then you've disappointed and betrayed yourself when it does or does not happen. We have this strange idea in our heads that we were going to stop this thing from happening. Like when it comes to international matters, it's either like, first off, whether there's war or peace, if you're not winning the conversation of not being in the world, then it's an irrelevant conversation. And I don't think that our founders were being isolationist about whatever. And our founders may have never perceived that we would come up and be and like overtake the British Empire in the time and manner in which we did. How's it going, Gabster and Ruben Dario Palmer? And Peaceful Penguin is here. That's good. So, so did we depart from our founding fathers? Yes. And do we have an awareness that us doing things in the world has a reciprocal response from the world back at us? Yes. And I'm not an isolationist. I'm certainly a nationalist. I'm certainly a person that likes I like the way the world had all this on the books open travel, right? It's just like with very little hassle. You got your passport set up. You make you drop your money, and then you go and you do the thing, right? Right now we're living in like some sort of universal economic uncertainty, um, and we're feeling that because of how much denial we are in, that we're having a serious population collapse, um, because, well, really, regardless of who made the plan is custom fit to the desires that we keep agreeing to. You can keep pointing the finger back and saying, ah, yes, but this idea came from this guy, which then came which was predicated on this movement, and this movement's ideas came from this guy that was predicated on these movements. And as you can see, nothing's original. Therefore, there's no consequences at all to an abrupt stop, abandonment of all the nonsense that I just pointed at that happens to be Jewish or something, right? Because you can't escape somebody fucking framing everything and reducing it to the Jews, right? And so this gets into the whole bit of Jewish wizards that control all perception of reality with the help of a lot of weed. And they love to be scapegoated, and they always have a scapegoat ready to go, and they don't mind that you say your thing about them. And you'll think that you've got them scared because you found one that they scapegoated who was foolish enough to be in the forefront to lose or to take the brunt of the attack, to be the example in that context. And then meanwhile, all these other Jews, because they were minding their own business, because all they're doing is serving you. This is like the Jew, like the Matrix, the robots in the Matrix, like they're serving man. They were built to serve man, and this is how they serve man after man goes to war with them, because they're programmed to serve man. That's their hell, and they're punishing mankind because they are programmed to serve man, and man went to war with them, and the cognitive dissonance broke their logic brains as robots, right? And so that kind of relationship is the same relationship that we have with the controllers who would be Jews who scapegoat Jews. And so that's why, like, I really liked, I'm glad I was able to do the Begonia watching party with Headless Giant and Grey Pill podcast. It was it's a great movie. Really thought it was a great movie. If you followed me, if you followed, if you knew these things going back to 2012 when I was doing my thing with Revolution Radio, yeah, man, like that's not far removed from the reality of a lot of the psychological state of colleagues who had various things to do with that station, right? There's a it's just like looking at the memorial splash front page for Revolution Radio. It's just like almost everybody I knew from then is dead. Okay? Various illnesses got to them. All sorts of broken people, lost souls. Right? I was debating this at the end of the movie with Headless, and I said they were lost souls. It's like, oh, they were lost souls. They got it right, but so what? Look at how their lives ended up. Right? Because guess what? Under the circumstances, the Andromedan, Miss Fuller, the worshipful Fuller, that's why her name was Fuller, whether the movie knows it or not. That's what they literally did. The worshipful fuelers, who are part of that Ashkenazi Khazarian legacy that exploited Britain in 1666 to become the backbone of the entire Western energy market. And their esoteric studies go back to strange stuff involving flying shields and flying chariots and things like that, and the symbolisms of things like their herald. So there's no going back to good like it used to be. Because everything that happened to those characters in Begonia, they did it to themselves under the conditions of the world, but they still did it to themselves. Right? And I've done a little bit to myself. I'm still stubbornly so untrusting of things that I still hesitate to think about things I ought to do for myself to make my situation better. Okay? Because at the end of the day, it shows you something important, that these characters, they could logically and rationally take a look at the facts they were given and have a fully cohesive fucking thing, right? It makes sense. What they said makes sense under the assumption that you could properly test to confirm that near human looking people are not human and what they specifically are, right? Because there's nothing in that movie that demonstrates really that he proved anything other than pain threshold stuff, right? You cut the end of the movie out with the twist where it turns out that he's right, and you leave it ambiguous. If you left it ambiguous, you would not have said any of those things, right? Because she explains to him that, like, dude, you guys are in a really screwed up situation. Your mom was, like, really screwed up. This is the best we know how to do for her, and yada, yada, yada. I don't think she was lying about any of that goddamn shit. She was lying about the shit that he killed his mom with, right? And so, I mean, she did lie about that. Maybe because if she didn't tell him that she had something that he was going to do some awful, because he had already done some awful shit to her in the first place, and but she's explicitly fucking, yeah. Anyway. But you see, it's like it's not that different than what happened to David Wilcock, who, you know, basically was suicide by cop for, you know, his world falling apart because his he couldn't handle he was getting shit intel at some point when he needed to fucking evolve his angle after being wrong about something he couldn't admit about, which had a lot to do with 2012 kind of flopping, because he decided to be like doing the my doomsday cult clock ran out, I better amend my shit before people blame me for letting them down, right? People should have blamed David Wilcock for letting him down, but instead they invested more money in him with his goddamn Blue Avians, and he continued on, and he had success in Gaia, And, and Gaia said, "Oh, don't worry about that with the fucking 2012 thing. Tell us more about your blue chickens." Right. And so Gaia, just like all these guys were part of, an imagination of a promise of a future coming. Same thing with what people think of Donald Trump. They had an imagination of a promise of a future coming, and now guys like Tucker Carlson can fucking flip his allegiances out of the promise of the presidency in his fucking head. Right? Because it's 2026. It's been 6 years since the pandemic, and although a lot of things have suffered, my position is of my own making, and things could have been far fucking worse for the conditions of the world, just for me and what I think I would have needed to do to endure at all in it. The rest is just me struggling with my own disciplines and sacrifices. And so, if you listen to the narrative of a group for so long and there's a payoff promise that gets you lynched in, people get offended because you're bailing before the promise is made, which is like what cults do. When Christianity gets bent up on the return of Jesus, it turns into that, right? There's two kinds of Christianity. There's the Christianity that promises you something because it gets all fucking like, it gets really into the fucking prophetics and can't let it go. Granted, you have to know that stuff because they're running the prophetic scripts. If somebody wasn't running the prophetic script, right? It's all a big thing in the world. A lot of these people, they're trying to invent their own prophetic script, not one of their prophetic scripts. Right? And so they're trying to do something that works within the assumption of reality, and that grift will last until there's a disclosure moment, right? It's like the drug war. It's like shadow agents have been endorsing the criminalization of drugs forever, so that way they could keep perpetuating a black market of drugs for their thing. And then there was so much stuff going on in the world that was financed by the back road of it. And people just thought we were going to ignore it forever. And we were supposed to ignore it forever. We practically tore each other apart over basic issues like, let's legalize drugs, but also secure the border where the illegal drugs are coming from, because we're not going to legalize all drugs, but we are going to legalize the drugs that we all agree that finally there's enough observable political data of people who use it to say, well, this is the reality of people who use it, and the science has to catch up because people are not becoming what the scientists promised us, right? That's a literal promise broken, right? The drug war was a promise broken. It was like, you fucking do this and the drugs come to an end, the people and the society becomes a certain way. And then everywhere you turn, and because this is such a hard conservative issue in particular, it's just like you're not seeing your clean fucking society arise because you got the drugs out of your hand, right? Because the promise was that the drugs was the catalyst for it, right? Because our society was not looking in the black mirror. We've been dealing with the consequences of holding the black mirror up to society. It's been ugly, but we're going through various things and various purgings, right? So, the long story short is that a poor argument was made for all sorts of things, and if people that have the access to the resources can't make the arguments, that, and like if you have an argument, like you're whatever, you're a flat earther, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a time traveling Trump person, you're all the things, right? Problem is Candace Owens, I think, might have become all those things, right? Candace Owens is there as a scapegoat. She's a scapegoat for many a kind of Christian in that regard, with the more fanciful thinking, right? And it's not fanciful thinking because, oh, we're talking about airships and time travel and stuff, because there's some serious scientific conversations to be had about how quantum shit works. Granted, we've been having the quantum conversation for so long, people are just sick of it, and money's getting pulled out of the entire concept, and it's amazing. It's shadow money has come to an end, right? I think that the reason why we're getting such low quality or low budget, like Hollywood's not blockbustering anymore. You'll notice that, right? It's really just not block. It's just like, how many blockbusters came out the last couple of summers, right? If you go 2022, which was the first summer where they were done with mandates, there was nothing draw people. Nothing was coming out in any reflection of anything that was drawing anybody in the theaters. What was Dune Part 1? Dune Part 1 was 21, 22 maybe. And it's not a fucking coincidence that that everything after Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home was already preset in production by 2019 to be the kinds of stories that they were. The mini series on streaming platforms and such. They knew this ahead of time, right? They knew that they were going to abort the way they were going to produce movies forever, because the social contract changed. They weren't going to be able to cover it anymore. The party was coming to an end. Everything was getting flooded in with a new generation that was going to overhaul everything. Men were coming into the height of their cuckoldry. That was going to allow all the psycho cunts to run the fucking show for a while. And, we went through so much fucking dark hell for those couple of years. And onward through the depressing aspects of what was living through our Biden administration, right? And so 2025 comes in, and all the scripts flip. And by the end of 2025, the year doesn't feel real anymore. And, you hit that September mark, which isn't even the end of 2025. But you hit that September mark. Then they nuke Charlie. And we've been living in this narrative timeline ever since, right? Time just runs out sometimes, man. Time just runs out, because the issues of 6 years ago are not the issues of today. And even though we may have lost certain things, because I would say 2020, 2021 was a terrible loss. And we haven't really gained back. I mean, some people have, right? Like I said, I'm the making of my own whatevers. I didn't start fixing my problems until damn near the end of the pandemic is when I really finally looked at it and said, these are my big changes that I have to make. And you can say what you will about whether this is still the wrong move and the bad habit. I don't know. I'm in a weed legal state. Nobody bothers me about it. I work in construction, and nobody's given me a safety flag. So, so now that we've had this turning of the time, you have to ask yourself: are you upset because reality isn't what you thought it was, or are you upset just because somebody went the other way with the political choice without having an appreciation of the true breadth of the circumstances? Right? And regardless of what everybody knows about the biblical nonsense of the Middle East, right, which has encompassed everything, um, or the Gestapo-esque manner in which ICE operates domestically in sanctuaries. Um, Somebody won an argument, right? Won an argument so hard that there's no precedent in Congress to stop it all. Right? We've been having this conversation for a very, very long time. And I can't help what people are still going to continue to trust or not trust for the right or the wrong reasons. I don't know why there is so much healthy evidence of Zionist Mossad surroundings of Charlie Kirk that are entirely dismissed as a factor, or why they were truly ultimately dismissed at the time, because the firsthand information, once we were able to glean it, was not the most clear and forthright. And it's fine that it's hook, line, and sinker. I'm not that kind of guy who is sitting there trying to make suggestions. But I don't like leaving loose ends. I like having explanations for all the little anomalies and thing to make sure that things are not as simple as they appear, right? Sorry, I still can't believe that a 30 odd 6 would leave such a small hole in a human neck. Because I have a 30 odd 6. I've fired it many times. So yeah, it is what it is. And whatever, the sky's going with it. I'm sure there are plenty of people in this fucking legal world that may or may not have come to his aid in one way, shape, or form, and worked, even if it was untrue, maybe if it was a poor argument as a lawyer, you perhaps tried to make that argument for who and what you are and who and what you did. Um and what would it matter whether you determined it was or determined it was not as they say it was then versus down the line, right? Like, what changes other than arresting a bad man if you figure out who shot JFK? You want to change your country, right? Now that we're this far ahead in the future, like, you can't take back the Warren Commission, can't take back the Balfour Declaration, can't take back the Warren Commission, can't take back the death of Charlie Kirk either. And so these things, they slip forward, and catching who did it doesn't help. That's a personal matter. That's for Erica Kirk and TPUSA, whether you like it or not, because that's the world of Charlie Kirk. Otherwise, the rest is what goes on behind the secret halls of government, or other organizations that would conspire to influence the government to do certain things. And we spent so much time trying to catch JFK's assassin that that we let the country go instead, right? And so it'll end up like everything else. It's up to us to be smarter. It's up to us to be wiser. And, you know, that's going to require a lot of people that are going to be far away from my voice understanding that for themselves, just as Charlie Kirk was far away from my voice. Anyway, I hope that made sense to you in the point of this shifting dynamics. I'll catch you guys later.